Welcome to Talk to Me Baby, the show that believes knowing yourself and living in accordance with who you are is the biggest asset you can possess in life. I'm your host, Emily de Armas, and today we are going to talk about what to do when you don't know what to do. So, confusion. This kind of ties into confusion. It also just ties into what it is that you should do while you're waiting for an answer. So, sometimes in life we have small questions, big questions. We're not exactly sure what it is that we should do, and there are different approaches that you can take to figuring that out. So, let's get into small talk. A few years ago, when I was still trying to figure out what services to offer in my business and what exactly I should be doing, I thought for a moment that I wanted to do coaching. And at the time, group coaching was a huge model. I think it is still to this day. And I signed up to learn how to teach group coaching through a group coaching program. It was a little pyramid schemey, I'm not going to lie. I'm going to sign up for a group coaching program to learn how I can do a group coaching program. Anyway, I invested $10,000 in this and it really didn't work out. It wasn't for me. It didn't make any sense. The program wasn't that good to begin with. It was not worth the money. There were some wonderful things that came out of it, but for the most part, it was a wash. Okay. However, one thing that this woman who was running this program said that has stuck with me and I actually think is very good is that the quality of our questions dictates the quality of our answers. So, this is my first tip for you. When you don't know what to do, first get clear on what is it that I'm even asking? What am I even trying to understand here? Now, that doesn't mean that you have to have a really specific question to get a good answer, but it just means that you cannot have a vague question. If you have a vague question, you are going to get a vague answer. And then what ends up happening is you feel like, well, I have no inner guidance, or my inner guidance is not good enough, or it's not speaking loud enough, or I'm not interpreting it well enough because I just keep getting these vague inclinations, or I'm not really sure. I'm still in a state of confusion. It could be that you are just not asking questions that are going to get you a good answer. It could be that you need to focus on what question am I asking? What am I really trying to understand here? What am I really trying to get at here? Because big questions that have a lot of different elements and a lot of different parts are going to get us answers that are not satisfying. So I'll give you an example. The other day, I was trying to figure out what I should do with my email list because I have this email list and I was mostly focusing on marketing type stuff. Now I'm transitioning because I want to include more about this podcast in there. And I'm still not exactly sure how to do that. I'm still trying to figure out how that makes sense. And I'm navigating all that. But my question was, what am I supposed to do with this email thing? That was basically my question. What should I be doing with my email list? Like it was just this big question mark. What am I supposed to be doing with it? I'm actually sure it's not here. Yes, it is. Email. What am I doing? It's on my little list here behind me. You can't see me if you're listening to this on audio, but in one of the other episodes, we talked about creating goal planning and goal setting lists. And so the list that I have on my board here has it on there. So anyway, what should I do with the emails? And then I realized, okay, I need to get a little more specific with my question here because that's a lot. There are many things I could do with my email. So I thought, okay, I just want to know how often should I be emailing my list? That was my question. And there's some schools of thought that say you should be emailing your email list every single day. Those people are super successful. There are people who say once a week, and those people are also super successful. And then everything in between, right? There are examples of success any way you slice and dice it. So I had to kind of figure out, okay, what would actually work for me because every day feels like too much. Once a week feels sort of doable, but I'm not doing it right now. Twice a month is the number that I landed on. So that's what I'm going to aim for now. So now I have a little more direction. I know what my next step is. Without knowing that first initial piece of information, I would not be able to move forward. And the way that I arrived at that information is just asking myself, really just throwing out options. So that's my second tip for you is just figure out enough so that you can determine what your next step is. You might want to ask, well, what are my possibilities here? Right? What are all the possibilities of what could potentially be done in this situation? That will help you narrow down not only your question so that you can ask a better question and get a better answer, but it will help you identify, oh, okay, so then now I know this is my next step. I know that if now I want to email my list twice a month, that I can figure out what would be the content of those emails? Do I want them to be the same every time? Do I want them to be slightly different? Maybe one of them is podcast focused. Maybe the other one is focused on other stuff that I've got going on. That I still don't have the answer to, but at least I know what I need to figure out next. My next tip for you is to just let the question go. Because we've all had that experience when you're trying to remember something like that song, it was by that band that I used to really like, and you're trying to remember so hard that you have completely blocked yourself. I mean, there's just a blank in your mind. There's absolutely nothing coming through. And then as soon as you focus on something else, boom, the answer just pops into your head. And you're like, oh yeah, it was that band. So it's the same thing when we have these life questions, right? We've all had those eureka moments in the shower right before you're going to bed, and you have this realization. You have to be able to let the question go, because this is one of my favorite Abraham Hicks quotes. You cannot receive the answer if you are still asking the question. Okay? If you are still focused on the question, you are not going to receive the answer. And this makes perfect sense. For example, if somebody asked you, hey, do you have a recommendation for a good Italian restaurant in this neighborhood? You probably could come up with an answer. But if that person keeps talking, okay, well, yeah, because I really want to eat Italian food and we were looking for some good gnocchi and we found this place, but it didn't seem like they had gnocchi. And so we're trying to find this other place and they were busy and we really wanted Italian because we couldn't have Italian yesterday and it's my father-in-law's favorite and blah, 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 blah. And you're standing there and you're like, I have an answer for you. If you would stop talking, I could tell you. That is what your inner voice is thinking when you have a question, but you won't stop fixating on the question or variations of the question. You are not letting the answer come through because you're still asking. You are still in a process of actively asking the question. So you have to be able to release the question, figure out this is what my question is. I know that I will get an answer, but I have to stop fixating on it. Because as long as you're fixated on the question and you're still asking the question and you're still focused on, I really need to know. And if you have especially anxiety around it, you are not going to be able to listen to your inner voice. It might be trying to talk to you, but it's going to get in there in like little tiny jabs and one word edgewise because you're still talking, quote unquote, and you're still asking. So you have to be able to let go of the question. And how do we let go of the question? Well, simple. You distract yourself long enough to allow it to come through. Sometimes if it's a question that's really big or it's really bugging you, it's hard to let go, right? It's hard not to be fixated on it. You have to be able to engage your mind just enough on something else so that you can actually receive the answer. That's why a lot of us get really good ideas when we're in the shower or when we're busy doing something else. For me, it's usually if I'm out for a walk, if I am cleaning out a drawer, if I'm just cleaning in general. I'm moving my body, I'm engaged in what I'm doing. I've quieted my mind enough to allow the answer to come through. So figure out what those activities are for you and just focus on them. And just trust, this is my next tip, trust that you will get the answer. Trust that you will figure it out. Trust that it will come through. Now, if you have really no idea, you could also go the route of taking a more active approach to figuring out what to do. And that would entail research. Find out what those options are. Find out what the possibilities are. Talk to people who are doing the thing that you think you might want to do or have done the thing that you think you might want to do. Talk to people who have experience in that area. Start voicing the ideas that you have, and that will help you determine what your next possible step could be. Sometimes talking it out is helpful. Sometimes a pro and con list does really work. If you are not super obsessed with getting the answer, okay? If you are really anxious about getting the answer, then I would recommend that you let it go more than anything else, because sometimes the more information that you want or the more fixated you are on getting an answer, the more blind spots you end up creating for yourself because you're not open to other possibilities that you hadn't thought of because you're just like, I really need to figure out what to do, right? Or then you end up in like analysis paralysis because now you have too many options of what to do. You will know for yourself how you feel and what it is that's on your mind. Only you can answer that question. Only you know how it is that you are feeling in that moment. But research is not in and of itself a bad thing. So do some research. Find out information. Use that to help inform you on what you might want to potentially do next. My next tip for you is to use deadlines to your benefit. Sometimes deadlines can make us feel really stressed out because it's like I have to come to a conclusion by a certain time and. If there's a question and you need to figure out what it is you're going to do and you have a deadline, then what I recommend is that you do as much of your part as possible. That includes the information gathering, researching, getting clear on what the question is, and then you let it go and you let the universe do the other part, which is bringing you the answer. If you're really against the wire, though, you can do things like we've talked about in even episode 1 of this podcast, like body pendulum. You can go with whatever feels best to you in that moment. Because remember that sometimes you are going to just have to take a leap of faith on things, or sometimes you are just going to have to pull the trigger and make a decision, period. When you're able to do that and just trust that it's going to work out for you, then you can feel a little bit more comfortable. Even if you don't have all of the information and you don't have all the facts, this is the best guess that I can make right now. Feel good about it. Own it, right? I am a firm believer that every single experience is teaching you something, even the things that feel like mistakes or like failures have a silver lining. There's something that you gained, there's something that you got out of it that you wouldn't have otherwise. And so if you look at it that way, nothing is really that bad of a decision. You can always kind of figure something out. And most situations have some level of flexibility. You are not stuck in any one situation of your life. You can always change course. So be a little bit easy about it too. Now, if this is an open-ended question, and I see this a lot like in the business world when business owners are trying to figure out how to sell something. What's the best strategy for me to sell? What is the best strategy for me to present my offer, my goods, my services to the world? There are so many infinite answers to that question, and all of them can get you a good result. But people get really stuck on the fact that there's so many different ways that they just stay in this analysis paralysis mode or info gathering mode where you're learning, but you're not doing. And at some point, you're going to have to do. So if this is an open-ended question or situation on what you have to do next, maybe a deadline is helpful if you give it to yourself and you decide, okay, by this day, I'm going to figure this out. Because otherwise, you can just keep spinning your wheels forever and not actually move forward in any one direction because there's so many different ways to accomplish whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. So at that point, having more information is not going to help you at all. So I would give myself a deadline and just say, I'm going to figure this out by this day. And I'm just going to go. I'm just going to start. I'm just going to move in that direction and I'll figure it out as I go. If you're in analysis paralysis, you can't figure anything out anyway because you're stuck. And that's not helpful because at least if you're moving in a direction, if it turns out to be the wrong thing, then now you know. And so you can go a different direction. But if you never move at all, you have no information to work with. You're going to be stuck forever. So make a decision and just move forward, period. Let's do deep talk because I think that not knowing what to do is something that a lot of us fear. We don't like that feeling of the unknown. We don't like that feeling of icky, I'm not sure, confusion, whatever. And it's because humans like certainty and we live in a very uncertain world. And so we're always chasing this thing, which we can't really ever attain. At some point, you just have to make the best determination that you can and move forward. So when you don't know what to do, I think it's helpful to just remind yourself that nobody really knows what to do. Nobody has it all figured out. Nobody has all the answers. People have gone before you and people have experienced things and they may be able to guide you. But at the end of the day, they're not you. They don't have your skills, your history, your life knowledge. They haven't lived your life. So for good or for bad, you do have to make those decisions on your own. But if you can listen to your inner guidance and your inner voice, then it will make things so much better because your inner guidance is always leading you down the path that you need to go down. Even if that path leads to an obstacle, there's probably something in that situation that you needed to gain in order for you to understand something better. Like, do I love the fact that I invested $10,000 in a coaching program that really didn't work out for me? No, in retrospect, it would have been probably a wiser decision not to have gone through that process. However, I learned a lot about what not to do. I learned a lot about myself. And I'm actually happy with the fact that I can maintain this attitude and that I'm not killing myself over the decision, and I'm not super resentful of myself over the decision. Was it a great decision? No. In hindsight, it wasn't. However, the fact that now I can sit here and say that and really not feel bad about it and not beat myself up about it is really an accomplishment. Coming from where I've come from, okay? Before, I would have never let myself forget about it. I would have been so mean to myself about it. I would have been punishing myself for it. I would have reminded myself of that every time I wanted to make another investment. I would have been like, well, you don't know what you're doing because you invested all this money. And I mean, it basically just went down the drain and da da da. That's part of being a human, and it's part of being a business owner, that you're going to make investments in things that just don't work out. As a human, you're going to go down paths that lead to dead ends, and you're going to have to turn around. You're going to have to go backwards. If you can develop resilience, and if you can develop a sense of trust that you gained knowledge from that experience, and I have, because now as a consultant, I work with coaches occasionally. And because I have all this background knowledge, I can really help them. I understand that industry and that space. I also understand the pitfalls of that industry and that space as well. And so I can help people navigate through that way better than had I not gone through that situation. So I think that it is all working out for me. For better or worse, whatever I'm going through, that's the attitude that I try to adopt. It's all working out for me, right? This is all in my benefit. And oftentimes you can't see that until you're further down the line, right? Because everything is a hindsight. You can't connect the dots until after you've lived through the dots. But it's helpful if you take that approach. So if you're not sure what to do and you're paralyzed because you know you need to make a decision, but you feel so much pressure, the first thing I would say is just take the pressure off, because you're not going to be able to go through any of the steps that we've talked about in this episode if you are beating yourself up about the fact that you haven't made a decision, or if you feel like this decision is the weight of the world on your shoulders, or you really feel like you have to choose, and you have to choose well, and you can't make a mistake. I guarantee you, if you look at all the mistakes, quote unquote, that you've made in your life, you can probably find a silver lining, and you can probably find how those things benefited you in some way. It's just in how you look at it. And if you can't see the benefit now, I guarantee you at some point you will see the benefit. Because maybe you gained knowledge that is helpful later on in the future, or you got more clarity about what it is that you really wanted, or your desires became even stronger. We actually gain a lot more from our failures than we do from our successes. I don't know if you've ever set out a goal and then you get to the goal and you're like, oh, that's it. If you were groomed to be an overachiever in your childhood, that's basically whenever you attain any goal. You're like, okay. And then you're just on to the next thing, right? When you make a mistake, you learn a lot more about yourself and about life. And we're so afraid of making mistakes because we've been taught that it's the worst thing ever. And part of that is because humans cling so tightly to this concept of life itself. And when you cling to this concept of life, you actually suffocate it. And then you don't allow yourself to receive the best that life has to offer, because you're so obsessed with doing it right and you're so obsessed with not getting it wrong that then you don't get anything. You don't get the juice out of life and out of your experiences because you're so focused on not screwing things up that you can't really enjoy life. And that's kind of the whole point of why we're here, is to enjoy life. The other thing I want to talk about before we wrap is that your inner voice is not always bells and angels coming down from the heavens to give you a message. A lot of times it is a very quiet sense of knowing. It is even just a sense of excitement of, this idea I like. This potential path feels good to me. This decision feels good to me, right? When you're trying to figure out what to do and you don't know what to do, you really have two options. You can either set out to find that information and start looking at what your possibilities are and what your choices are and let that inspire you, or you can decide that you're going to get really clear on what it is that you're trying to accomplish, what it is that you are trying to figure out, and then allow the next step to be shown to you. Those are really the two options that you have. So if you're trying to figure out what to do and it's something brand new, you're just really not sure, like, I don't know what my next step is, then it's helpful to research. It's helpful to talk to people who are in the position that you want to be in, figure out what it is that they did. If you are on the other camp where you are searching for an answer that's not coming up, I mean, you know that there is one, but it's not there, You need to get really clear on what is it that I'm asking? Why is it that I'm asking this? And then just let go and let the answer come to you, and the answer will come to you. And then you'll know what to do next. Two different approaches to kind of the same situation, depending on what your circumstances are. But in any case, trust that you're being led to the right thing. And trust that sometimes just that quiet little sense of, I think I might want to go in this direction is your inner voice talking to you. It doesn't have to be this grand announcement from the universe in order for you to figure it out. Oftentimes, your inner voice is speaking to you in a whisper. It's not using a megaphone. To recap, we talked about a few things that you can do if you don't know what to do, including getting clear on the question, letting the question go, distracting yourself, researching if you feel like researching, listing out potential next steps. And we also talked about why you should trust yourself at the end of the day and not be so afraid to make a mistake and not put so much pressure on yourself to figure things out ASAP. Because I guarantee that it's not as serious as you think it is. Even if you're up against a deadline or you're giving yourself a deadline and you have to figure things out, the more you obsess, the less you're going to be able to receive the answer. So the answer's there for you. It's just a question of being open enough to listen to it and open enough to trust what it is that you're feeling to guide you to the next step. Sometimes the best thing to do when you don't know what to do is nothing, and making space for the something to appear. As always, anything that I am wearing that is linkable will be listed down below. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend, share it with somebody who you think might enjoy it and help spread the word. I'm your host, Emily de Armas. This has been your episode of Talk to Me Baby, and I will talk to you later.